That was a hefty introduction. I did not come up with that myself, by the way. So thank you to the team for helping me there. So it's great to be here with you all today. As mentioned, the intro has been provided for me, but I'm Mandy Dunnuck. I'm our global talent management, director of global talent management at Philips. So the way that we're organized at Philips is I'm part of a global center of excellence. And so my team is globally deployed. And what I love about my role is we help set the talent management strategy for our 70,000 person workforce. But then also I get to business partner and work directly with those organizations that I support. So much of what Heidi shared resonates with myself as well, where we are organizationally, and a lot of the same challenges we're working on the capability side of things. Again, in my role, I support our North America region. So essentially our leader that reports into our CEO for North America and our head of people, as well as our informatics business. And I'll talk a little bit about our journey in talent management and why it's been an interesting journey over the last couple of years with our global reorganization. As mentioned, I've been mainly in the healthcare space, so been on the pharmaceutical side of healthcare, coming over to Philips. If you may or may not be aware, does anybody own a Sonicare toothbrush here or use Norelco products? So that's probably the most common products you'd be aware of, but we're also, majority of our services and products are actually in the four walls of a hospital. So if you've ever had an MRI or a CAT scan or any imaging equipment, if you've seen a bedside patient monitor and visited someone in the hospital, or if you've been in the hospital, or ultrasound devices as well. So that's mainly where we play, is healthcare technology and really helping our customers and healthcare systems be at the forefront of earlier diagnosis and accurate diagnosis as well. Again, I love the space that we're in. I think we are very fortunate to be able to do the work that we get to do, and I really enjoy collaborating and working with others in the process. And why we're all here is to learn from one another as well. So a little bit about what I'm going to share today is the evolution of talent management and how it's been a really interesting journey for the last 2 years and some of those lessons learned and insights that we've experienced at Philips. So to take you back and kind of set the scene for you, October 2022, we had a global CEO change, and I'm sure like many of you going through that reorganization process, it created a lot of movement in the organization. We announced that reorganization with the new CEO. We also, in that process, had a lot of movement of talent and leaders across the organization. So in that, the former leadership team that we knew at that moment pretty much was no longer intact. So it was a very interesting journey in time, I think, for all employees, because the strategy, the direction, the tone was different, regardless if you really align to a business, a region, or a function. And a big part of that for us at Philips was a lot of the challenges we endured as a company. We went through supply chain challenges like many other organizations during COVID. We unfortunately had some safety recall challenges as well. And so our stock took a tumble, if you will, took a hit. And so we really wanted to get accountability back with the business end to end. And that's what created a lot of the need to change. But as a part of that, at that time as well, as it pertained to talent, we did not have a formalized talent cadence. So I don't know if many of you in your journey, we went from having really great buttoned up resources, and we went through this phase where we no longer had a formal mid-year review. It was kind of an organic check-in. And then we found that we weren't really actively engaging in talent management philosophy and really achieving our goals as a result. So as part of this change, it was in a way kind of starting back from baseline and really thinking differently about how we wanted to approach it in the future. And as a part of that, we had lack of accountability and ownership, really for succession planning, developing talent, and really creating the readiness for the future. And as I mentioned, with all that leadership change, our succession plans overnight became very weak because we tapped into those succession plans and really promoted those leaders, which left kind of a dry well, if you will, of future talent that we were thinking about for those positions. Again, we also have a lot of talent metrics. I'm sure like many of you, we were noticing the minute you kind of take your foot off the gas, we started to retract and regress, if you will, with our female talent. And so when you think about senior director level and above, we started noticing we're slipping back with our senior leaders, and specifically gender diversity being female. So when we looked at that, we said, okay, we also currently at the time did not have any clearly defined metrics or KPIs. What common language were we all really thinking about as we looked at talent? And how do we take that from, if you will, pass the baton of accountability from the HR function over to the people leaders themselves? And so that was part of our journey as well. We knew where we wanted to be in the future was our desired state. And so in the future, we wanted to have robust succession plans, a talent pipeline really built for the future. So not just thinking about today, but thinking about that future state, as Heidi also alluded to as well. What were the skills and the competencies and the job experiences that we wanted for the future of where we were heading versus just those roles today? We also noticed that we wanted accountability for our employees to actually be shared with leaders and employees. We also had very similar when you think about capability development. Oftentimes you hear, what's the company doing for me? Or what's my manager doing for me? And there was really, again, an accountability shift there to say, what am I doing for myself when I think about how am I figuring out what I don't know about this organization? Who am I networking with to get exposed more to what's available for me? And then how am I actually taking advantage of the resources that exist internally? And we wanted to also increase that readiness. So as I mentioned with our succession plans being weak, once we identified those candidates, we really wanted to make sure that we were then pivoting and thinking about the readiness to help them prepare for that future role. I always like to say if someone won the lottery tomorrow and they quit their job, do we have somebody else to step in automatically and keep the machine running, if you will, like we didn't miss a beat. We also wanted to really create an environment for cross-organizational movement. So we are very much at Phillips, again, 70,000 person organization, heavily matrixed organization. So how many of you all here work in heavily matrixed organizations? I see some hands raised, okay. So yeah, it takes a lot of, you might not be your direct team, but you are working with a whole group of people to make decisions and kind of keep things moving forward. And that's kind of the organizational environment that we're in. And so we really wanted to encourage and foster cross-organizational movement, especially at earlier career roles. We often find sometimes we have people in executive leadership positions, and let's say they've been in commercial roles their entire career, and it's a big risk to the organization to take a chance on somebody at that senior of a level to then move them into something they've never experienced before. So how can we do a better job earlier on in someone's career to give them a more diversified background so when they get to those roles of increased responsibility, they can actually then have that experience they can leverage and learn from. So additionally, we also wanted to make sure that last and not least, we were also measuring talent progress. What were the KPIs that we were going to align to so we could monitor results? So as we got into, start thinking about what that looked like, and again, I won't review all the details here, but this just gives you a flavor of what we had to embark on in our journey. The first step in that, of course, was aligning with our leadership. If our goal was to really, again, pass that baton of accountability, how do we think differently about really engaging them in the process and making sure we had buy-in? So to kind of, again, go back, we had that global reorganization. It was announced in October of 2022. The organization changed into the new model in April of 23. And then I'll tell you, the North America team, they were ready to go, I would say by August of 23. We had our first talent cadence with them. I'll share a little bit more about my informatics business and kind of the difference and the different dynamics of those two teams and what I've learned along the way in my role as well in supporting them. But this really was kind of the way that we wanted to show up, right? When you think about our operating model, how do we think about talent differently? A couple of the things that we wanted to talk about were ownership, scope and content, and then process. So really thinking differently about how deep do we go in the organization, what do our talent cadences look like, and then where's that accountability with those leaders? So essentially our leadership team could instill that in their direct reports as well. So a little bit about really getting clear on the expectations. And this specifically, I'll talk to my North America team. We had a chance to really align around this and really have good discussion in our August of 23 meeting. What I very quickly learned is that, as I mentioned before, heavily matrix organization, we got started thinking about talent management, but we also have extended leaders that are indirect reports that join that leadership team. And so what I learned by just kind of trial and error very quickly was that by engaging that extended leadership team at that meeting, they also were going to have talent cadences that they were working with in their business. So again, I'll go back to region, business, function. Region being North America as a geography. We have several businesses across Phillips. But let's say a business leader, for example, was joining our talent session in North America. They were also joining their business session, and we, again, as I mentioned before, didn't necessarily have common templates, a robust process, because all that had kind of gone away from years past. It had been more organic in nature with continuous check-ins. So it very quickly dawned on me, and this is where I really appreciate the construct of my team, is we actually had to have one common language and a more standardized approach to how we were thinking about talent when we were engaging in those meaningful moments throughout the year, and even something as simple as what templates and areas of focus are we having at those meaningful moments. And this gives you a flavor of what I propose to my team as a COE. We all support those different organizations across the construct of Phillips. And so very quickly we said, okay, at North America, we're gonna have 2 meaningful moments at our leadership meetings, one focused on assessing potential and really looking at top talent in the organization, making sure we're calibrating, making sure we're thinking on the same page about how we're assessing that potential. And then as we move into the June-July timeframe, we'll then start to pivot on succession plans. And then each of those you can see in the green is actually then the development check-ins that come as a result. So I always say in talent management, and this is the same for training for anyone that has a learning and development background, you can always check the box for the event, but what are you doing after the event is the most meaningful portion of talent management, right? So it's coming out of those sessions, and are you having development discussions with those top potential candidates? Are we looking at, as Heidi mentioned, gig assignments? Are we looking at ways that we can increase their capabilities and really, again, help them grow? And then for succession candidates, are we having discussions with the individuals they actually want to even be on the succession plan? Oftentimes in this conversation we say, oh, you know what? Sally would be great at this position. Well, maybe Sally has absolutely no aspiration to be in your seat one day. And so it's really important that we have those discussions, even if they're an indirect report, and think about how we're helping them prepare for that role. Something I'll mention as well, as I failed to point out for you all, is one big shift for us in the alignment as well was we actually also have ownership and succession. So we don't drive that really deep in the organization, but at least at the North American market leadership level and for my CEO of North America, they're each responsible for their own succession plan, and we actually integrated that into their goals and objectives last year in 2024. So their succession health was something that we measured and monitored, as well as development plans for their direct reports. So it was a way of accountability and kind of passing that baton. So again, the reason that we had to propose this cadence was, and we're still in continual evolution of this, is how do we again make meaningful moments come together, but to have more synergy across those different reporting lines as we're trying to, again, promote cross-organizational movement. You can also see our Workday activity. So we do also, I know Heidi mentioned Workday and the talent card. We have certain triggers throughout the year. We wanted to gate those. We did also launch an individual development plan in Workday last year. We did not require that, but that's actually something that many of us leveraged in our role if for succession candidates and for top talents, and brought that into some of the different programs we were running. Last year, because as I mentioned, we noticed a gap with our female executive leaders, it caused us to actually launch a female executive mentorship program where we leveraged the IDP as a part of that process and really did an in-depth overview to see how we did that mentorship pairing as a part of that. So just different ways we were leveraging some of those tools and resources as well. So what did that look like? When we thought about that cadence, once we got alignment there across the larger organization, then it really became about, well, let's see, if my leader is participating in, if a business leader, let's say, we'll use this regional business leader, is participating in a region discussion on talent, they can take those inputs, but then ultimately that accountability goes back to the business, right? So their direct reporting line. So something we agreed upon, because this could get very kind of messy really quick when thinking about this talent management process, was ultimately your direct reporting line has final say on that candidate, thinking of succession planning. So, you know, if you get input from your other stakeholders, bring that back to your own talent discussion, you finalize that with your leadership team, then go activate that, have those conversations, think about development discussions. And then lastly, we do make succession planning visible and transparent for employees in Workday. So that's the last step in the process. Oftentimes, we are a very operational company. People want to make that change in Workday and again check the box without even having that discussion with the candidate. So it's really important, again, coming back to basics and fundamentals, that all that great work was done, and that was the last step in the process. And then as a talent team, we can leverage that data, right? We can leverage that data to think about our talent acceleration programs, other opportunities we have for different talent and networking opportunities throughout the year. Another example we provided was an integrated supply chain leader. So again, they're part of our functions group, and an ISC leader might gain input from the region or the business that they really support or they're aligned to, but ultimately they're going to review and validate that with their ISC leadership team, and then ultimately make those changes in Workday as well. So a lot of moving parts and pieces, and you can see a lot of, I'd say, highly integrated or interdependent exchanges that need to happen in order for us to be successful with talent management at Philips, given our construct. And I'll also share with you a leadership development roadmap. So this is also something that we really thought about. Similarly, again, we had a challenge around people leader capabilities. And for North America, it was really interesting because we said every assessment that came back was really around gaps around having critical or crucial conversations, dealing with resilience, right, and having emotional intelligence. So these are all things that we noticed, and similar, again, basic fundamentals of the role, just having a feedback and a check-in conversation with your direct reports on a frequent basis. These were not things that were formalized or really had expectations of our leaders in the past. So we wanted, again, to give them the tools and resources they needed to be better prepared. We as an organization leverage leaders as coach. So I know there's a ton of different coaching methodologies out there, but we really decided on the critical few. So what do we want to do well, and what are some things that we need to be aware of as we think about our roadmap for 2024? And specifically, you can see the required training was, we had a big culture rebranding last year, so that was a big piece of it, as well as leaders as coaches and participating in that for our people leaders across North America. So again, thinking differently about their role as a people leader, and then continuing on that journey here in 2025. So again, what were the results and the reflections that came of this? You'll notice that I learned through this process, I mentioned my informatics business that I didn't talk much about. I learned that we have to meet the business where they are. And I share that because as a 70,000 person organization, many people, like I said, North America, they jumped right in, and by August of 23, just 6 months later, they were already in their operating model and ready to they were in their norming phase. So if you think of forming, storming, norming, performing, they were norming. They were normalizing 6 months later. My informatics business just actually had more leadership team changes just announced in the last month, 2 years later in that process. So what I realized very quickly, and everybody was at a different stage. My informatics business being still in that storming phase 2 years later. And they're not really at a place where they can start thinking about the same type of format or environment where we had those talent exchanges with North America. As a result of that, I wanted to work very closely with my HR team, my HR business partners, to kind of in a, I would say, less structured format, get to the same results with succession plans. So it was really working through the HR team to meet with their leaders, to have that same level of discussion, just not in that formal setting as we did in North America. So it's kind of finding a different path to get to the same goal, but I learned that very quickly in the process. It couldn't be a one-size-fits-all approach. Coordination and interdependence were highly critical to success. And I'll share that in Philips, we're very much an organization of continuous improvement. I sometimes say we're building the plane as we're flying it, but we'll definitely continue to iterate over time. And so it's one of those things where we learned very quickly by working with our HR teams and our HR business partners and our leaders. That's how we made those small tweaks every quarter almost, to think differently about how we were showing up with our talent management processes. Number one, we knew we needed some sort of structure. Number two, we knew we needed some sort of aligned template. And as we continue to reiterate, we want to make sure now that we are thinking and we're simplifying as well. So that was really a critical learning is, consistency is key, but less is more. Let's get more out of the discussions and less preparedness for those people leaders as well to show up and have that meaningful discussion. We also wanted to, again, activate the HR team. That comes back to that continuous learning. And I think you have to have that open dialogue in all of our roles to really, again, meet the team where they are and can keep kind of moving things forward. And then really we wanted to evolve from events to embedded behaviors. So again, thinking differently, it's not just this, I'm preparing these slides and I have a great succession plan, and then you go to hire for the role and no one in that succession plan gets the position, right? How many have experienced that before in our roles? I think almost all hands raised there. So how are we doing a better job of actually truly getting alignment with leadership on those candidates and also making sure that we are truly preparing them when we're not in those sessions? That's where the real work happens. And so those were some of the lessons learned. Some of that metrics and measurement around that as well is we actually created a leadership talent dashboard. So we're looking to kind of drive that deeper in the organization, but we started at what we call I'll say our supervisory level 3, and we didn't go to 4 just yet. So supervisory 3 is essentially 2 layers down from our global CEO. But starting there to look at metrics included employee engagement, voluntary turnover, retention, gender diversity in senior level roles, and then succession health. Something as a metric we're looking at this year, if we can actually really quantify it and measure it, is succession conversion. So succession conversion really is the true, I think, telltale to say, as we mentioned, do I have someone on the succession plan and did they get that open role, right? That's the true, I think, the true metric there if we're doing our jobs well and our leaders are doing their jobs well. So again, looking at some of those are just, thinking about differing factors as we continue to evolve and grow. And then IDP completion is something we're still toying with. I think it was determined this year we're not going to enforce it. I really believe, again, I think it's a tool we can leverage, our leaders can leverage, we can leverage in talent, again, for certain examples I shared, like the Female Executive Mentorship Program. But really, creating greater opportunities for talent growth, and it's very similar to our year-end review process as well. So it's a guided tool, really allowing the leader to have a deep discussion and then us as a team supporting them where needed. So those were some of the lessons learned. So again, we're on a continuous journey. By no means are we finished just yet, but we really did have to start from scratch with all the organizational change. And we're really looking forward to, again, now we're at a point where it's really about succession readiness. I think our leaders have gotten very comfortable in a pattern of being accountable for their own succession plans. Now we're really pivoting a little bit to focus on increasing that readiness. So how are we taking those leaders and better preparing them for the future? So that's a little bit about our journey here at Philips and the lessons learned along the way in our case study today. But I'll leave the remaining time here just for any questions you all have or any comments.
Thank you. You mentioned working in a really matrixed organization, and I was wondering, how have you dealt with succession across BUs, across functions, where it might not be a direct line manager move that's the best move for the candidate or for the business?
Yeah, great question. And believe it or not, we really struggle with this because you have, like, even in HR, I'm like, we're in HR, we should be, living our talent philosophies. They're fighting over talent, right? It's like a war of talent in your own organization. But it is a conversation, and that's what's really, that's what I think the structures created that for us, where we're actually now even starting to have internal HR conversations. So I share with you all a lot around what we're doing with our stakeholders, but what's really neat is we're actually even starting to do some pipelining for specific roles. And so aligning back to strategic workforce planning, critical positions, if someone, let's say, is on a succession plan, they could be on multiple succession plans. We find that a lot. So you'll have, let's say, a top talent. I can think of someone that currently is in our ultrasound business, but she's also in North America. 2 leaders and 2 heads of HR are fighting over her. Does she stay in the ultrasound vertical, business vertical, and grow her career there? Or do we take her out of that and put her in a different role to diversify her background? And so really, she could go either direction, but we want to think differently about, again, how we're making sure we're rounding out. And so I think a balance of that, you can have the plan on paper, but it's also going to be, when does the next role come available? What's her readiness? So we did create a limitation where any individual top talent couldn't be on more than 3 succession plans. That helped us because, then we did that analysis too to say, and we actually call that out. That's what's, I think, really nice about being a centralized team in our COE and not reporting into the individual regions, businesses, and functions. So as part of the EXCO review, we actually did that analysis to say, we have these leaders and they're in 5 succession plans. So that was actually part of the meeting with our EXCO, was to say, okay, how do we pare this back? And how do we kind of focus in the development a little bit? We don't want to limit somebody to 1 or 2 roles, but they shouldn't be on 5 plans either. That's not realistic. So I hope that helps to answer your question.
Hi, my name is Leanna. I work for Tech Systems. I took some notes, so I'm going to be looking down.
Sure.
But you mentioned various phases of engagement across different populations. How do you balance the implementation of changes and iteration while also creating a space for more buy-in and comfortability, especially in those populations where the journey might be more new?
Yeah, so again, I think that's where our continuous improvement comes in as well. So we really created, I have to give major props to my head of HR for North America. She is a great sponsor, and she's like, where do we need to focus? And she kind of comes in, but she creates an open, I'll take a step back to say, psychological safety and trust are so critical in these discussions. You really can't have people sharing talent or even their experiences. Maybe someone's not, someone says someone's ready now, and this other person says they're ready after next, right? It's if you really want to get great engagement in these discussions and have a true conversation, that trust has to be established, kind of as table stakes. I think because of that trust, we also create the opportunity for reflection. How do we do this differently? What would you like to see as a result? And I think that you have to give people a baseline to start with, because when they don't know what they don't know, you want to give them direction and clarity. But I think we're very much open to thinking differently about how we continue to evolve. And I come back to templates are so simple, but for a leader preparing for these, they are getting pulled so many different directions. Again, the more simplified we can create this, the prep, if you will, the better outcome they're having as well. So I think that's maybe an example of, you want to create structure, but you also want to make sure we're creating an environment where we can be flexible and fluid. And candidly, I think coming back to the this cadence I shared, what we found is, this was a roadmap for us. A lot of this just even depended on when's the leadership team getting together, right? And creating the space for the talent exchange. So even though I created this for my team and socialized it, we iterated, I didn't even follow script to a suit, right? So it kind of became our roadmap, but being able to, I like to say, freedom within the framework, if you will. We have a framework, but there's freedom within it. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, Heidi.
I have a question, Mandy. How are you thinking about assessing potential? Like, are there certain markers or factors that you're using to do that? Thanks.
Great question. We do have, so thankfully, again, I mentioned that talent infrastructure was there from several years ago. And forgive me, I forget if it's Korn Ferry that we leveraged some of our assessment, or maybe it was Deloitte. But we essentially, when we assess potential, we have what we call top talents, strong contributors, and explore fit. And we actually have criteria based on agility, competency, and aspiration. So it's kind of the formula for success to look at those 3 buckets. It's why I love calibrating on assessing potential on the front end of the year, is because it exposes, I should say, how much variability our leaders have, because it can be rather subjective. And so that has to be a lot of trust too, because there's a lot of challenge there. But the biggest one I see where people struggle is, this person's a rock star, they're a top talent. But again, if that top talent, if that rock star doesn't have any aspiration, they love what they're doing and they just want to keep doing what they're doing for the rest of their career, they're actually a strong contributor by definition. So it's really making sure we're being honest with ourselves. And why I like starting with assessing potential, because I think these are, talents that it can be interwoven. I really think because, again, that we're having the right conversation about the right people when we get to succession planning. We don't want to have someone that doesn't have aspiration to be on a plan, and we're looking for opportunities or development paths for them, when really they are great at what they do today. We need those people in our organizations to keep things moving. So yeah, really for us, it's top talent, it's strong contributor, and it's explore fit. And then explore fit, again, it's not to say it's not necessarily performance, this is really around their potential, but it's more about, do they have the skills and tools and knowledge to actually meet the expectations of the role? right? And if they don't, are they better suited for another role within the organization? So it's really making sure that we're looking at that clearly and objectively. And I'll share, we did actually layer performance in last year because it was a big topic for us in 2024 at our June talent exchange. We made some, as a team, again, the trust was there. We had some really great discussions about talents that were not fit in the right role. And as a team coming together to say, they'll say, this person is great at being operational, but they are not customer facing or don't understand the sales side of things. And then someone said, I have this role that's available right now. So what a great way that we were actually thinking about moving talent over time, right, the next quarter or two, but then creating the opportunity for a critical role to be filled by the right talent. So that's some of the dialogue we got into as well. All right. Thank you all so much.